There's a certain mad scientist computer programmer guy, I'm not going to point any thumbs back at him, who's been making videos online showing you how to make your own languages, make them up from scratch, and how to make them work. I'm going to show you why that's a bad idea unless you're trying to be a know-it-all, show off to your friends, or make a YouTube channel like I'm not going to name. Alright, I'm going to be comparing the process of you making your own language versus using a library to get the exact same result. So I'm going to be using some of the examples from the web particularly. You should take a look at my other videos previously that I did on this, as I made this language work to produce this output. Well, now we have another way where it's going to be using the library, and that's the exact same output. You cannot tell the difference between these two because their source codes are exactly the same. They are carbon copies of each other, but now we're going to take a look and see how are these done. So, how do we do it? Well, one of them we used that standard language here, but I also have one where I used a library. I called in my own library that I wrote, and we'll talk about how this works, but it's just a little bit different, but not very much extra work to make the same thing happen. And it's actually the exact same thing, but it's a whole lot less work in the back end. So instead of doing all, and if you don't remember the work we did, go back and review the other two videos. We did a lot of work. We wrote the interpreter. We had to configure the server. We had to do so many different things, and it was such a lot. Anyway, I've got a couple videos on that deal with all the steps. So let's take a look now and see what my library looks like. This is all I had to do to allow me to use that other file. I used an existing language that's already registered on the server. None of it's PHP. And here I have, we're going to compare that with my using library. So it's going to first call this in. Calls mylib PHP, and that's where we have this file is now included as a part of this. Now we're going to create a class that has a constructor on there of my title. Right down here, this is my class I created, and this is my constructor. I throw that in there as an argument, and it does everything that my H command did over here on the constructor. And it also sets up the closing of that file, because remember, the other one self-closed. We're doing that in my destructor on this. It adds all my closure because my variable is going to go out of scope. The variable that contains the instance of this class goes out of scope. The garbage collector is going to destroy it, and therefore we can output the final footer of our page. I can create them as members of this class, or I can create individual functions over here for everything else I want to do. And what I do is up to me. As I write this thing, I can recode this. I have the same control to rewrite this as I did writing my own language. So I can rewrite this out, the source code. It's organized a little bit differently. And this is shorter than the whole scripting engine was. So let's just take another look too, at our useLib. So it calls the class constructor, and then we call that function. And you see we got P and we got P here, but this is new. This is creating the class. This is working with the function. And so here it is. We just throw it on in there as a argument to a function. And I can still have all the other access to PHP's functions in and around here, including adding other tags that I might not have thought to include in my language. I can do whatever I want to. Now I could just have my language output whatever I wanted to as raw code. But hey, this is pretty cool. It's got all those same features. It's just we replace this with the head command. We replace these function calls with P commands. For the R command, we just had as a member off of our P class. And we could have done this as a function. If we had done it differently in our library, we could have just put this function R external, and I wouldn't have had to call it from the class. We have our choices on what we do with this. But that's how much simpler using a library, writing our library is, as opposed to writing a whole made-up language and making the computer learn to understand our made-up language. Thank you for watching.